Welcome to this scientific session. Today we will talk about or hear presentations that focus on the primary and secondary resources and the involvement of the informal sector. So we have a number of very interesting presentations, I hope. And yeah, so therefore we don't have too much time. So therefore I guess we can just jump into the content. I'm happy to introduce you to the next speaker. We have Michael Gasser here. He will present about the dismantling productivity analysis of informal sectors recycling in Delhi. Please, Michael.
Thank you very much, Elisabeth. So yeah, I'm super happy to be here and present you this work that we did about dismantling productivity in the informal sector in Delhi. When I talk about we, who do I talk about? I talk about EcoWork. We are a startup that is focused on finding a solution for the problem of integrating the informal sector into the established e-waste recycling and dismantling chains. Next slide, please. So just in short, what do we intend to do? We intend to build a co-working space that can act as a hub for informal e-waste micro-entrepreneurs to come in and, on the one hand, learn how it is to operate a formal business, and on the other hand, grow their own business, because in many cases they are not able to do that because they're lacking the investment capital and access to resources that they would need to do so. So this co-working space, EcoWork, we call it the EcoWork space, is kind of an incubator hub. It's a place where you get access to machineries you might not be able to access otherwise, and that will help you grow your business and gradually formalize over a certain time period. Next slide, please. So these are some impressions how we imagine this EcoWork space to look like. And you see a few of the features and offers that we are looking at. Yeah, so now we're in the process of actually finding a space where we can do that. We are just about to sign a lease for a facility. And of course, now we have to go beyond the mock-ups. Next slide, please. So one of the key questions that comes up is really, how does a facility need to look like in order for the informal micro-entrepreneurs to feel comfortable in it? You know, how can we build it that it enables fast dismantling, safe dismantling, and creates an environment where people want to come to? And one of the key reasons is, of course, that we want to keep, or as much as possible, improve the efficiency of the dismantling processes that the informal sector uses, or the people that come to us use, so that they actually have an incentive to come. And one key issues many of you will be familiar with is the issue of PPEs, personal protective equipment, that are very difficult to introduce, and it's very difficult to find the right way to convince people to use them. Particularly in warmer climates, but not only because of that, because often also people think they keep them from getting their work done. So what we've done over the last few months is to perform a time and motion study. So for that, we bought different devices that you see here down on the left, and we hired informal dismantlers to dismantle these devices for us. And we recorded the times that it took them to dismantle everything and the individual steps involved, and tried to figure out, okay, what kind of work environment do we have to offer so that it is interesting? And I'm going to share with you two main insights. One is on the next slide, which is what we try to do is we try to do a benchmarking. So we try to compare the dismantling times numbers that we find in the informal sector, or measured in the informal sector, with international numbers. What we found out is that actually the people we hired and everybody we tried to hire was not dismantling the whole device all the way down to individual components, but they were only specialized in a certain part of that work. So actually we could not do this comparison, or at least not yet, but what we could do is we could ask in interviews how long they would assume somebody takes in dismantling a device and compare that to the international benchmarks. And what you can see is, in some cases it's faster, and sometimes it's takes a bit more time, but more or less, like, their estimates are very much in line with what we find internationally. So that we found really interesting. And for us, what is really interesting for EcoWork, if you think about this idea of this facility, is that EcoWork lowers transaction costs. Each of these dismantlers buys, let's say, keyboards, dismantles them halfway, and then has to find a buyer for the next work step. And if we can integrate this all in a facility, then we decrease a lot of these transaction costs and should be able to make this a much more efficient operation overall. And now to the next slide, please. And here on the next slide, this is some work we did concerning the use of PPEs, particularly gloves. Here we worked with Vasim. He's an informal dismantler who has 6 years of experience. And we told him, listen, take these devices. Here it was CD-ROM drives, and dismantle 10 with gloves, dismantle 10 without gloves. And we will record the time that takes you, and we will record how you feel about it, right? And you can already see from the picture, something went terribly wrong. Wasim is wearing the gloves the wrong way around. And that is because he said he does not have enough tactile feel to actually work with the devices. Dismantling a CD-ROM drive, the way these people do it, needs a lot of tactile feeling in the fingertips. And these gloves do not enable that. So he turned around the gloves. Which then, of course, also means that they're not really protecting him anymore. And at the same time, it also increases the time for dismantling that we saw here. So for us, I think the key learning here is really, okay, we really have to think about what kind of equipment do we want to introduce, in what steps do we want to introduce it, and where does it make sense? And I think we can only be inspired by how accident prevention is thought about in other countries and generally thought about by specialists. And that is to say, PPEs only get introduced if you cannot avoid the health and accident risks in any other way. And the key point of that is other protective devices and work organizations. So if you think about dismantling a CD-ROM drive, a lot of the work will need a lot of tactile feel in the fingertips. And that you probably want to do without gloves. But then if you need a hammer and you're smashing certain parts, then you want to have gloves. And of course, you can't put them on and take them off all the time. So you need to separate these work steps into individual workstations. So these are some of the learnings we're taking. We haven't finished the study yet, but these are some of the key insights we find very interesting and we feel is very important to share with the international community. And with that, in the next slide, I would just like to thank you very much for your attention and yeah, look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Michael, for this super interesting insights. I guess there's a lot more to look into and to discuss also. The next speaker is Susanne Karcher. I'm really happy also to introduce her. She will, her talk will be about inclusivity through app connection, the informal waste collection sector integration in South Africa. Susanne, please.
My name is Suzanne. I'm the national coordinator of the SRI project, the Sustainable Recycling Industry project in South Africa. And it is against the background of the recent introduction of extended producer responsibility and the big emphasis of informal sector integration in South Africa that we actually had this idea to say, let's develop an app. Let's actually spend some time and see, can we use an app that would actually facilitate that envisioned informal sector integration. Next. So why do we need an app? Because we have learned, specifically with other recyclables, that this famous last end mile is a huge issue for companies as well, because those people that are doing really good work are just not noticed. They are not registered. They don't want to get registered. In South Africa, we have a situation that 80% of our informal collectors are not South Africans. So they're not really interested to hand over their details to the government. But nevertheless, they fulfill a very, very important role in South Africa. And we wanted to find a way to develop an app that works a bit like an Uber, you know, that can actually tell a business or a housewife where is your next informal collector, and with some basic technology, bring them together. So the idea would be to be able to facilitate the flow of materials from households and businesses, even government departments, because there's a huge policy now on asset release for governments, and then link it up directly with local buyback centers, recyclers, and obviously the collector. So we would have all the stakeholders in the value chain connected. The idea would be, because this is electronic waste, that we want to track and trace the flow of materials. It's very, very important. Also with the planned future introduction of certain minimum requirements, we foresee that collectors should ideally really only take things from A to B. So if we come up with an app like this, we need to make sure that it can trace and track, and that somehow e-waste is not lost somewhere down the road next to the river. So we put a lot of emphasis on this, and that it can deliver value to all of the users, obviously with the informal collector in mind, but also the tier 1 recyclers, which are in our case the big recyclers, the end-use processors and everything in between, and that we can create a sustainable and viable interface to promote e-waste recycling. Next. So what were the critical deliverables, the design parameters, so to speak? Well, we need a functionality that can actually service all the stakeholders in the value chain that we try to reach with it. It must meet the deliverables timeframe. The free project has very clear timeframes, and the idea is that we're going to test drive that app as early as the end of this year, perhaps early next year. It must be highly customizable, and it must be self-sustaining and viable past the implementation. So no point of now spending a lot of money to get this app right, and in 2 years no one knows anymore how to use that app. Next. And for that, my colleague Chris White actually developed something very clever, which was called a recycling app functionality matrix, which is actually the heart piece of what I'm talking today. Because we did some research, there are a couple of international app developers, but to our delight, we found that we had actually very strong app development activities going on in South Africa, and that there were already apps on the market at the time, more orientated with the packaging industry, but we looked at that and said, hey, with a bit of customization, we could very easily play into the same type of app intelligence. But now the question was, we whittled it down to 3. How are we making now a fair assessment? How can we compare apples with apples? And that is where this recycling app functionality matrix comes into play, because it has 28 functions defined that are essential, that we need for our app. And we have mapped it in this matrix, and we've defined then further each functionality group. Up to 8 features could be then noted in terms of what a specific app developer can offer. And then we had a score. So, going down for each of the app developers, we scored them between 0 and 3 points. And that enabled us to do an objective evaluation of 3 app developers. Next. And what we found was then, based on what we need, we came across a company, and I don't have the time to show this today now, but I will put it in the chat. There's a lovely video clip, and I'll put it in there right now, that we came across a company called Basadi. Again, it's local young guys that have developed that. And we show you here a couple of copies of the interface, what it looks like. It has already been very successfully applied by also major brand owners. As you can see, it offers reward systems. It offers definitely traceability. It is a blockchain built type of app. And with a little bit of customization, we will be able to utilize this app and watch that space, because whenever that app is going, we will share our experience with the rest of the world again. Next. And that is it. So I'll wait obviously until the end, and then you can direct any questions and answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Suzanne. Also, you very well kept the time. Thank you for that. So the next speaker is Ebenezi Kumi. He will talk about trust by key, exploring existing linkages between the formal and informal actors in Ghana's e-waste sector. Please, go ahead.
All right. Thanks a lot, Elisabeth. And I'm here to present Trust by Key, which is a report, one of the flagship reports by Imagine. Imagine is an EU-funded project in Ghana and it's electronic waste management in Ghana. We had earlier conducted major studies on the value chain of e-waste in Ghana, and this one was really to explore the pathways to formalization, because almost 95% or over of e-waste is managed by informal dealers in Ghana. Next slide. Yeah, so the background really was to explore existing partnerships between formal and informal, and then collect some insights on the practices from stakeholders, and then identify some good practices and develop some recommendations for public sector. Informal scrap dealers are really dominant in Ghana. And I mean, I'm in the Ghana session of the forum, and behind me, actually, there is the photo sort of exhibition by GIZ on this. And so scrap dealers really are a key part of the e-waste in Ghana. Next slide. So what did we do in this research to find a bridge between formal and informal scrap dealers? We did a literature review. We also did in-depth qualitative studies of 13 waste initiatives, not only e-waste, but waste in general, hoping to get some insights from across the sector. And then we did really an in-depth analysis of 5 of those studies and analyzed it according to a certain framework that we set. And this really is a framework of what I have on the next slide. Next slide. Around business modules of these initiatives that are bridging the gap between formal and informal waste recycling companies, but also looking at the agreement, what forms the agreement, what are some of the incentives that make people partnerships work between formal and informal, and what are some of the impacts and really the challenges. So circling around this partnership was all of these components that we try to distill. Next slide. So what are some of the findings around those 4 components? The first one really was about incentives. And here we found out that market price, given an informal scrap dealer, market price was really a key thing for them to form partnerships. And then in Ghana, we also realized that pre-financing, where the formal company pre-finances the scrap dealer, was key. And so here we have key incentive, really monetary pre-financing dominating, but there are also other aspects such as training, PPEs. Earlier, Michael of EcoWork was talking about PPEs and how they must be reasonable. I found that was very insightful, and I would like to know more about that research actually. But yeah, PPE is also featured here as an incentive for partnerships, and then things like health insurance, etc. Next slide. Then another aspect, which is the agreement, we found that a lot of, for convenience, a lot of the partnerships were really structured around ORA and sort of bilateral, non-binding nature, because the work is fluid and people don't want to be bogged down with, or informal dealers don't want to be bogged down with paperwork. So that was key. ORA and bilateral were more as opposed to written agreements, as you can see on this slide. But we also found out in recent time, there is a shift of some formal companies trying to do a combination of them to allow for flexibility for informal scrap dealers to work with. Next slide. Then the last aspect that we considered is really the challenges. And here you can see financing. There is also sometimes a tension between formal and informal scrap dealers on level playing field. Formal scrap dealers feel that they have to go through all the regulation, and that increases their costs. And so sometimes there is a bit of distrust around that. And many other challenges such as permit and location for scrap dealers to work. So there are quite a number of challenges. And with the other aspect also highlighted on that slide is really about education, which is many scrap dealers have really sometimes a little bit less knowledge about the poisoning and sort of the hazards associated with it, although they work with scrap all the time. Next slide. So yeah, what are the key recommendations of this analysis that we did? We said that one recommendation is really we have scrap associations already in Ghana, and so professionalizing them, opening up the scrap associations, offering them more training, and trying to work through the association will get more scrap dealers to be able to bridge that gap of linking with former recyclers. But also financial incentives, which featured quite a lot, as I mentioned about the incentive, which is key, is the big part of facilitating that link. And then projects like ours and many other projects, GIZ has a project in Ghana, SRI also has a project. They can also serve as a link, because we found in some cases, some NGOs and projects have been able to negotiate better prices on behalf of scrap dealers. Next slide. Yeah, pretty much. So that's it. Those are some of the key things. I think the report has more. As I mentioned, we have also this value chain analysis publications, and then we have a recent policy brief on awareness and how important it can be in the sub-Saharan Africa region on creating more consciousness about e-waste and its effects and benefits. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Ebenezer. Thank you for this interesting presentation. Also, good to see that you're at the event in Ghana. That's nice to have this background. And now I would like to move to the next and our last speaker, Keisuke Nansai. Sorry if I don't pronounce all the names right. Sorry for that to everyone. So the last presentation will be about changes in artisanal small-scale gold mining through time and associated environmental impacts in the Ativa West District in Ghana. Jesse, please, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you very much. This presentation is with some other colleagues. Is actually out of a collaborative research with colleagues from York University and the University of Ghana, funded by GCRF. Now, the background to the study, artisanal small-scale mining employs over 4 million people worldwide, and in Ghana, it employs an estimated 1 million people and creates a lot of job for indirect job for other people. Presently, it has changed in nature, it has changed in the type of equipment used, it has changed in area coverage, and that's resulting in a lot of or massive environmental impacts, much of which has not been well documented. So information about these changes remains a bit scanty and disjointed. So for our study, we try to examine the changes that artisanal small-scale mining has undergone in Ghana over the years, and the drivers that were behind these changes, and the extent of change, and the corresponding environmental impacts, using Ativa West District as an example. Ativa West District is in the eastern region of Ghana, and as you can see from the map. So for our methods, we actually did a field survey. We visited 5 communities within the Ativa district, and we interviewed through questionnaire administration 250 individuals, and also had additional 5 focus group discussions in 5 of these communities. We also carried out a land cover change analysis to determine the extent of change over the period between 1980 and then 2019. Now, so for our results, we detected that, or we found out that as some of the drivers of change. Human population change has been one of the those drivers, and we also have a very cumbersome licensing procedure, which makes facilitates small scale mining legally. So because of that, a lot of people wouldn't like to go through that procedure and would rather like to go underground and do illegal small scale mining, what we refer to in Ghana as galamsey. And then there is also the ease with which unskilled labor can easily be recruited into the sector. And we have the attractiveness of global gold prices, which is pushing a lot of people into this activity. So we have entrepreneurs and business people who live in the cities and sponsor the local people, on the ground to carry out these activities. And then we have the law, the weak law enforcement in the country, leading to a lot of illegal immigrants coming into the country. And most of these people find their way into the mining areas. And then these people, of course, have brought with them sophistication in the mining sector, bringing along all kinds of equipment. And so all these have brought about changes in the sector. And lastly, the involvement of political elite in the mining operations, people who are supposed to implement the regulations are the very people who are behind these operations. So it's very difficult for it to be controlled. Now, so we can see the population change over the years, how much the population have changed. Kwabin is the district capital of the district of Khetriwal West District, for instance. And we can see from here that from 1948 to present, 1948, the population was just about a little over 2,000. Presently, it's over 10,000, and it runs through all the communities. Looking at the world price of gold, in fact, the world price of gold, the nominal gold price is this gray curve that we see here. And as the world price of gold increases, we see the total gold mining, also increasing, and then the illegal gold mining also increasing alongside. So we realize that the global price of gold has been a major driver in bringing about these changes. So then the communities, we wanted to find out from the communities what they think has changed over the period. And according to them, about 47% of those we interacted with indicated that crop yield has changed tremendously. Some have indicated that availability of medicinal and indigenous plants are no more there. About approximately 25% indicated that. And then the price of food items, availability of drinking water, all these, according to the community members, have changed over the period. Now, we also try to find out the degree of change with regard to the various occupational groups. And with those engaged in farming, about 86% of them indicated that there has been a lot of change negatively, of course, in their farming operations because of the small-scale mining activities. Of course, those in the mining sector also have detected some change. About 62% of them have also indicated that they have experienced some changes. And it runs through. And if you look at the averages, for those who thought that there was no change, they are just about 7.3%. Those who felt that the change was very slight, the percentage was about 6.2%. And those who felt that there has been a complete change in the, within the environment is about 86% of the respondents. Now, we also noticed that alongside the changes, the methods used in mining or in these mining operations have also changed. We noticed that in the past, they were just using very simple tools, which were not causing much harm to the environment. But over the years, several changes have come in. So for the changes, we have 5 main types of changes that we identified. First, we have the illegal small-scale operators without any concession using simple tools. These are still in operation. Then we have illegal small-scale operators without any concession using sophisticated tools. So these are those who use, excavators and dredgers and, dredging platforms and all kinds of things. And then we have those we call the tributary miners or the tributary system of mining. They actually operate under large-scale miners who already hold concessions. So it's very difficult to determine that these guys are actually operating illegally because they go undercover. These guys themselves as if they are doing the right thing, but then are doing all kinds of illegal things and causing a lot of damage to the environment. Then recently there was a recent introduction where they use metal detectors to scan the ground for gold. So wherever there is a metal, they use the detectors to scan the ground, and then it beams for them to know that there is gold in that particular area. So these are some of the changes we observe in the mining operations or the mining methods. Then finally, we try to look at the percentage forest cover change from 1980 to 2019. And from the figures we have here, these are percentage changes, percentage coverage. So for 1980, for instance, close forests with very dense shrub vegetation covered about 38% of the entire area. I mean, that is talking of the Tiwa West district. As of 2019, this cover has changed to just about 20%, from 38 to 20%. And we see areas with open surfaces and grass herbaceous cover and background rather increasing. So the close forest has decreased, but open places is rather decreasing. And that is one thing we found so significant. So looking at some of the environmental damages.
Sorry, Jesse, can you wrap up, please? Because otherwise we will not have enough time for discussion.
Yes. So these are just some of the changes, the environmental impacts. And for my concluding remarks, artisanal small-scale mining has actually undergone a lot of changes. And Ghana can overcome these problems through multidimensional approach. The first one is strict law enforcement and stringent punishment to offenders, and then streamlining the licensing regime to ensure strict monitoring, provision of alternative means of livelihood, strengthening of institutions to avoid political interferences, and empowering local chiefs and making them more accountable. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jesse. So you were just about to finish this. Thank you very much. Sorry for the interruption. Thank you very much, everyone, for those interesting presentations. I think it was very insightful and we got a lot of new inputs also. So it is now time for the open discussion. So everyone from the audience who has a question, please put them in the chat and I can then direct them to the speakers. There is one question in the chat already now. The question would go to Suzanne. Where in South Africa are you planning to trial the app and what are the timelines for it?
Okay, easy to answer. It's Ilembe. Ilembe is in KwaZulu-Natal, a district municipality, and it has been chosen because Swisseco is already active there with other local economic empowerment projects, so it makes a lot of sense to group this up. The timelines are that we are in the process now to finalize the approval of the service provider, and that should happen in the next week. And then the customization of the app that we would be able to run would be in probably 3 weeks from now. The biggest headache that we have right now is to source the right people to train on that app. And that has to do that we need to find a way to institutionalize this whole part of the project in Ilembe. But we are positive that by early next year, we should have that training. It will have, as I said, a self-training module included after that as well, but initially the app developers will do the training. We will actually start a pilot, we will monitor it, and we hopefully have a report with some first observations in April, May 2022. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan, for this answer. Are there other questions from the audience? I don't see anything in the chat yet. Sonia, do you received anything through the Hoover app?
No, I didn't see any question.
Okay, I guess all the presentations were so clear. Are there maybe other questions from the speakers to one of the other speakers? Or some comments you want to raise, comments you want to make?
Yeah, just a comment to Michael, that I was really inspired about the EcoWorks vision, and please keep me posted, because I think with my app and your EcoWorks model, we can go far together.
That's good. Thank you.
There is the hand raised from Ebenezer.
Yes, please.
Yes, no, I also wanted to mention to Michelle, I think the work around, I mean, your final conclusion that PPEs must be reasonable, I find it really interesting, because in Ghana, in 2018, when we had our first research, which was the value chain analysis, we traveled all across Ghana with talking to informal collectors and dismantlers. And I think it's really something that they struggle to do, to wear the PPEs and dismantle. So I think your research is really pointing to an interesting part that some sort of dismantling activities, you might not need PPEs, and other aspects you might need. And I find this really interesting. And I think we should see more how this can be practicalized, because the wholesale idea that all scrap dealers or informal dismantlers should use PPEs doesn't seem to work so far. So just wanted to say that's really interesting.
Yes. So thank you, everyone. And now just a short reminder for all the audience. Please go and make use of the voting in order to really get the best speaker of the whole conference, I think. So there's just on the slide you see now about the voting procedure. So go to the poll part. It's in the Hoover app. I think you all should see it. There you can then add the number of the best presenter, which is here. Thank you. And then you can just vote and give points to the presenter. I think we have a lot of candidates here for best presenter, so make use of that chance. And Sonia, you raised your hand, please.
Yeah, I have a question. I found interesting the statement of Ebenezer on the trust be key, but also on one of the remarks that workers, well, the informal sector activities around people are afraid of paperwork. Yes, correct, but maybe is there an experience on how to overcome this without paper? What can't we do? It's more a question.
Yeah, I think this was during one of our discussions, our initial sort of validation discussion of the findings. This was also raised by one one of the heads of the scrap associations who said that it's not that necessarily that they're afraid of paperwork, but also based on previous distrust or mistrust between them and some former recyclers and the experiences of it, which sort of guide them and make them a bit. But I guess, so I actually asked him what you are asking me, that what then for his association, what does he think are some of the simple ways that we can actually build these partnerships without a lot of paperwork? And of course, his answer is not that we have to do away with paperwork. I think they mentioned that in the associations, so at the moment, the law in Ghana, the electronic waste law, which was passed in 2016, it's really pushing for the scrap dealers to come together as an association. And so dealing with them individually doesn't seem to make the cut. But as an association, he mentioned, for instance, that in their association, the Greater Accra Scrap Dealers Association, there are quite a good number of people with knowledge on, let's say, a contract or previous experiences with partnerships with bigger companies. And so one way we can do that is really how we can tap into the association so that they get knowledge from the people in the association can help when there is a contract between or some paperwork between a scrap dealer and a former. So not necessarily them, but they can get help from the association. And so I think that's one way that we can do it. Without paperwork, I think it becomes a bit difficult also from the side of the former sort of recyclers, because it's, for instance, in one interview that we were having with a former recycler, he had mentioned that how he had pre-financed, and I mentioned pre-finance as a key incentive, pre-finance some scrap dealers, and they bought it away with the money. And there was no way to sort of trace and track them. And so without paperwork, it doesn't seem to be the way, but with minimal paperwork, with some technical, with support from an association that a particular scrap dealer or a particular informal business belongs to. Sonia, I'm not sure whether that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
So is there a second question you have, Sonia, because your hand is still raised?
Yes, it was. Yeah. I was writing it, but I can speak up.
Sorry.
It's about the study on mercury. Very interesting. Actually, it has a lot of information. Is there any report published? I would like to go into the insights of the data, the traits that you present there. Will you publish your paper? Is it already published? Mm-hmm.
My paper hasn't been published yet, and I'm working on it now. Hopefully, I can get it published maybe at the end of the year or the beginning of next year. I'm not sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I think there are no other questions, and it's just about time to close our session. So thank you to all the presenters. It was very interesting to listen to your presentations, and also then looking forward to receive some more insights maybe at the later point, also if the papers get published. I just see also that Christopher is here now. He was the co-chair for this session. I don't know, Christopher, if you want to say some closing words, and then we can close the session for today. I think Christopher is still in the face-to-face meeting in Ghana, so he cannot really join. Thank you, everyone. So I'm closing the workshop. Thank you everyone for participating, and hopefully you voted for the good presentations. And yeah, have a great rest of the day. Thank you, everyone. Bye.